It was supposed to be a standard day on set. Routine, predictable, safe. At least, that's what everyone thought, until it happened. The moment that has now spiraled into one of the most heated discussions in both Dylan Wang and Shen Yue's careers. A moment so raw, so unplanned, that it has sent shockwaves, not only through the fandom, but reportedly deep into their agency's meeting rooms. It began innocently enough. A scene was being filmed for their latest project, one that fans had already been counting down to for months. The script called for emotional tension, a little playful banter, and a gaze just long enough to keep the audience intrigued. But when Dylan and Shen Yue locked eyes, something shifted. It wasn't just acting anymore. Not to the crew, not to the fans watching the behind-the-scenes clip, and definitely not to the executives whose phones began ringing within minutes of the video going online. The moment lasted barely 15 seconds. Yet in those 15 seconds, you could feel it, an electricity that didn't belong to scripted dialogue or rehearsed gestures. Dylan leaned in ever so slightly, his tone dropping lower, softer. Shen Yue's expression changed, just subtly, but enough for sharp-eyed fans to notice. She smiled, not the bright, camera-ready kind, but the small, private kind. The one you give when you forget the cameras are even there. The clip leaked within hours. Some say it was a crew member. Others believe it was intentional. Perhaps a quiet rebellion from someone inside the production who didn't want this chemistry hidden. Either way, the fandom erupted. "This isn't acting anymore." One comment read, racking up thousands of likes. "This is them. This is real," another insisted. But while fans were celebrating the spark, insiders claim that behind closed doors, the mood was far from celebratory. Multiple sources have hinted that Dylan Wang's agency was the first to call an emergency meeting. The concern that the sudden flood of romance speculation could derail the promotional strategy they'd been crafting for months. They want to sell the project as a story, one insider allegedly said. They don't want the actors' personal lives overshadowing it. But that's easier said than done, because when Dylan and Shen Yue share a frame, the line between fiction and reality seems to blur completely. On Shen Yue's side, whispers began to emerge about her management feeling cornered. The fear wasn't just about rumors, it was about control. Once an on-screen pairing turns into a public romance in the eyes of the fans, the narrative becomes harder to manage. What if the show underperforms? What if one scandal pulls both of them down? What if the chemistry ends up hurting them more than helping? These are the kinds of questions agencies ask. Not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. Still, for fans, it feels like a cruel attempt to dim something genuine. And so, the narrative has split into two worlds. On one side, fans, who replay the leaked clip over and over, convinced they're witnessing the beginning, or perhaps the continuation, of something real. On the other, agencies, reportedly scrambling to downplay the moment, rewriting press statements, and even warning certain journalists not to ask personal questions in upcoming interviews. But here's the thing. When the chemistry is this undeniable, can it really be contained? Days after the clip's leak, Dylan and Shen Yue made their first public appearance together at a promotional event. Every camera in the room was pointed at them. Would they ignore each other? Would they act stiff and professional, as if to prove the agencies were in control? Instead, something remarkable happened. They didn't just stand side by side. They laughed. They leaned in to whisper between answers. At one point, Dylan brushed something off Shen Yue's shoulder. A small, casual touch, but one that sent Twitter, Weibo, and Instagram into chaos all over again. Some fans joked that the agencies must be tearing their hair out. Others called it a hero move, speculating that Dylan and Shen Yue were deliberately refusing to let outside pressure dictate their interactions. Behind the scenes, however, the tension only grew. Rumors began swirling that both were being given guidelines on what to say or not say about each other in interviews. One particularly telling claim that the agencies were considering editing future behind-the-scenes footage to remove moments that might send the wrong message. To fans, this felt like sabotage. To the agencies, it was damage control. But the more they tried to control the narrative, the more unstoppable it became. Fans began digging up old clips from previous projects, comparing micro-expressions, body language, even the way Dylan's voice softens when speaking to Shen Yue. Entire threads were dedicated to proving that this connection wasn't just a one-off fluke, it was history repeating itself. The crisis deepened when an entertainment reporter, known for having strong agency connections, published a cryptic post online. Sometimes, the problem isn't the actors. It's the story others don't want told. The post never mentioned names. It didn't have to. Within minutes, Dylan and Shen Yue's names were trending again, along with hashtags calling for the agencies to let them be. For now, both stars have remained silent on the rumors. They continue filming, smiling for the cameras, fulfilling their contracts. But that silence speaks volumes. It's the kind of silence that feels like a protective wall, one meant to shield something fragile from the storm raging outside. And maybe that's why fans are fighting so fiercely, because deep down, they believe this isn't just about gossip. It's about two people whose connection might be at risk, not from each other, but from the very systems meant to support them. The question now is, how far will the agencies go to keep control? And how far will Dylan Wang and Shen Yue go to keep this, whatever this is, alive? One thing is certain. When a 15-second unscripted moment can cause this much chaos, no amount of damage control can erase the truth people have already seen. If you believe that Dylan and Shen Yue deserve to tell their own story without interference, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the community that refuses to let this spark be silenced. Because in the end, the only people who should decide what's real are the ones living it.